Hey y'all, welcome to another from scratch cooking video. I shared about a month ago that I was going to be going through a little series about cooking from scratch. I shared with you my 5 staples that I always have in my kitchen that I believe are irreplaceable in a from scratch kitchen. Number 1 on that list was bone broth. So today is going to be all about bone broth. This one looks kind of crazy because when I put it in the fridge, it's settled like this, so that layer of fat is sideways, but this might not look very appetizing, but it is, I believe, one of the most nutritious foods you can feed your families. So this is our bone broth. I make it in large batches. I have a very old video from my first year on YouTube, so I'll link it below. You can go back and watch how I make bone broth. I was very camera shy back then, not the best editing, the best filming footage, but you'll get the gist of how to make it. Now I will tell you, I've altered my cooking times just a little bit from that video, so that is not actually how I make it now, but you'll get the main idea. Basically, I've reduced my cooking time. I still use the Instant Pot to make bone broth. I still use high quality grass-fed bones. I think I'm going to update that video for y'all, so if you are wanting to really get into making bone broth in your kitchen, you'll have an updated tutorial. Before I ramble too much about bone broth, let's talk about why you'd want to eat it, and then we'll talk about the meals I used to incorporate bone broth in for my family this past week. So bone broth is part of eating nose to tail from the animal, how our ancestors would have eaten meats 100+ years ago. In the American culture, if you're in America, we focus so much on muscle meats. We're only eating the ribeyes, the fillets, the rump roast. All of those cuts are what we typically focus on. We're not focusing on the organ meats anymore, pulling out broth from the bones. Our culture has made broth so easy just to buy at the store, which there's nothing wrong with that. That's a lot better than like a lot of other cooking options. If you're using bone broth from the store, it's going to be a lot better than the alternative of cooking like frozen packaged meals or eating out. But the broth from the store is not going to be nearly as nutritious as homemade bone broth because you are extracting that from those bones. It's not packaged and sealed up and preservatives added. So if you can make it yourself, you're going to get a lot more benefits of it. But basically, muscle meats contain an amino acid profile that, when overused, becomes inflammatory to the thyroid and kind of slows down your thyroid function, which can cause weight gain, postpartum issues for women, lots of like diabetic issues. Thyroid is just a really big cause of issues in women in general, just society in general. So we only focus on the muscle meats and aren't balancing it out with organ meats and bone broth. That's when problems can occur. So incorporating bone broth with meals that contain a lot of muscle meats is a way to kind of balance out that amino acid profile. You're going to get the glycine as well as the gelatin in a bone broth form. Gelatin is that congealed look you see in the broth. And in some of my video footage this week, you'll see a lot more congealed broth. This was not my best batch, and this is the last jar I had in the fridge to share with y'all today, so you'll see I need to make some more. But anyways, as I was saying, when our diets are overloaded in muscle meats, we're not getting that proper amino acid balance, which is where issues can arise. So that is why incorporating bone broth into your meals is so important. Now you can just drink bone broth. You can season it with some flavor, some high quality salt, and just sip on it. It is delicious, but I'll tell you, my family is not on board with that completely yet. I'm working on that. We're just not quite there. I probably don't flavor my broth as best as I could. I'd like a lot more fresh herbs from our garden, which we don't have right now, but I feel like eventually we'll start drinking more broth, but for now we just cook with it in literally everything, as you'll see in this video. So basically, just start incorporating bone broth. It's one of the easiest from scratch things to make in your kitchen. Again, stay tuned for an updated video tutorial on how to make bone broth. If you want just the quick rundown, check out my previous bone broth video, which I'll link down below for y'all. It's so easy. There's no reason you should not be making bone broth in your own home. Now, the only hang up I could see is sourcing high quality bones. How we get bones to make broth is from our local grass-fed farmer, which is about 30 minutes from us. We either go there, pick up bones, they sell them by the bags. They're super cheap. Bones are actually very cheap to source. Or when we get like cuts of meat, like ribeyes or roast that have the bone left in, we save those back. Same thing with chicken carcasses. Some of our backyard chickens we raise, if we butcher any, we save the carcass and use that for bones. I do prefer beef bones than like chicken or pork bones, but you're gonna get benefits from it all. I just feel like it's much more nutritious with the beef. But Do your own research there. I just hope that you can start incorporating bone broth into at least a couple meals a week into your family's diet from watching this video. So I'm going to show y'all 5 meals where we incorporated bone broth. Some of these are going to be not so conventional, and you'll see how easy it actually is to sneak this in and how delicious and flavorful bone broth will actually make your meals. I'm also going to touch a little bit on organ meats. I've had some people ask on how we incorporate organ meats into our family's diet. We actually just blended our own venison. We harvested some venison and processed it here at home. We just got the setup for that, so that was so fun. But within our grinding process for the ground venison, we incorporated some liver, heart, and like beef fat in there just to kind of hold it together. But we do incorporate organ meats in that way, but I'll also sneak them into any of my broth recipes as well. So you'll see in this video a few ways that I sneak in liver and heart into our family's diets. Let's jump in. I'll get right into the recipes because I know that's what you're here to see. So on Monday, we had a venison pot pie. So I started out a gravy base, which is this is how I make gravies. You'll see this throughout this entire video, how I make a bone broth based gravy. I start out with a little bit of butter, let that brown a bit, add some flour, stir it up, and then comes the broth. So I had some super jiggly broth in this recipe, so you'll see how beautiful and gelatinous this broth batch was. Perfect batch of broth. I can't wait to show y'all how to get this perfect jiggly broth in an upcoming video. So I basically made this gravy, added the broth, added some cream, or you could use milk. And then here's where I incorporate the liver into anytime I ever make gravy. So I pre-freeze what I call liver pops. I just pop some liver into our blender with a little bit of bone broth again. Here another way I sneak in bone broth, and puree it down to a liquid, and then put it in some freezer ice cube freezer molds, silicone molds. We have some bunny rabbit ones that were my kids from Easter last year, and then I also have freezed it in just some muffin tins and pop those out this way. This is just the easiest way to sneak organ meats into our family's diet. So if you aren't using an ancestral meat blend as we are, we just started using this actually, y'all, in the last couple of weeks when we harvested our venison from this fall. Organ meats, again, when you're only eating those muscle meats, you're not getting the balanced amino acid profile from the animal that God intended us to have. So sneaking in organ meat, sneaking in bone broth along with your muscle meats, because in America especially, we are very preference, our taste buds are very preference to muscle meats. So sneaking in these other things is not traditional, but it's so easy to do if you just start getting in the habit of it. So I snuck in a little liver pop, let that saute down into our gravy, which makes sort of a golden reddish gravy from that liver, but you don't ever taste the liver. Nobody in your family is going to notice. My kids don't love the taste of liver. My husband nor I do either, so we don't ever taste this liver. So trust me, you're not going to ruin your dish by sneaking in that liver pop. I let that all thicken, and then I just went in and added my venison, which I told y'all before had some heart, liver, beef fat, all this. This was our own personal grind that my husband and I did a couple weeks ago. And then I went back and added some pre-made rice, any veggies you had, and then I topped with some sourdough biscuits. I have not perfected my sourdough biscuit recipe yet to share with y'all, but when I do, I will share that with you guys. You'll see I did not have the perfect fluffy biscuit. I also almost burnt this dish because we were outside dealing with some pigs that day. We had to set up a pig fence for our new cootie coon pig, so I accidentally let this dish cook a little too long. But basically, you're just gonna make your gravy base with that bone broth, put your meat in there, your rice, whatever veggies you want to use, top with some biscuits. You could also just top this with like a sourdough skillet topping. I have a video on how a sourdough skillet I'll link below for you if you want to know what that is. But super easy venison pot pie, super delicious. Would have been better if I had not let it burn, but again, I let it cook a little bit too long, probably about 5 minutes too long, because that always happens to me. I always get tied up outside with a project, and dinner sometimes just isn't perfect. It is a very nutritious dinner that my family loved and enjoyed, and I'm honored to be able to cook these types of foods for my family. On Tuesday night, we had some just kind of meat wraps. You'll see again, we're using some venison. We eat a lot of venison and beef in our family. We do have chicken occasionally. We don't have any chicken out now, so that's why you won't see chicken in this video. We also don't have any pork because we are currently raising pork in our backyard. So we don't have pork processed yet. So you'll see lots of venison and beef in this video today. I do believe in varying your animal meats, but sometimes we just work with what we have. And that's what we have right now in the freezer, and that's what I'm gonna feed my family. So we had some meat wraps. I had made some sourdough tortillas that morning. I'll link the recipe I used for my tortilla wraps down below. They're super easy. You just put the dough together together with the sourdough starter that morning, let it ferment throughout the day, roll them out very thin, fry them on each side in a cast iron skillet, and they're ready to pop in whatever filling you want. So this was just sort of a meat and rice dish. To cook the meat, again, I used some of that ancestral venison blend, added some broth. This is a super easy way to cook any meat, is just cook it in bone broth. It's gonna add flavor, it's gonna add moisture back to your meat, especially if you're using something like venison, which doesn't have a lot of fat in it naturally. We do add some beef fat in when we ground our venison, but adding that broth is just gonna give a little more moisture and flavor to your venison, to your little wraps, and it's super delicious. I added some rice, some cooked garlic and onion, and it was a delicious little meat rice wrap. Super easy dinner. I served this with a side of fruit or whatever my family is craving. If we had sauerkraut, that would have been perfect on top. We're out of sauerkraut right now, y'all. We were kind of out of a lot of stuff as I was filming this video, so I kind of just, this is an example of working with what you have and making nourishing dishes with what you have on hand, because there are times we don't go to the grocery store every week. We only go to the grocery store every 2 to 3 weeks actually. And like I said, we don't have a huge variety of meat in our freezer right now. So I'm just working with what I have, cleaning our freezer out with what we currently have in stock, keeping our budget on track, and not going to the grocery store for this and that little ingredient that I need just because I'm craving it that night for a recipe. I can adapt recipes to what we have on hand, and that's what I hope to teach y'all through these videos, is that these meals I'm sharing with you aren't true recipes. They're just ingredients I pull together that are nourishing and satisfying to our family. Again, they can be altered to your family's preferences, but they're gonna include bone broth, which is gonna make such a nourishing meal for you to feed your family. On Wednesday, this one's kind of funny because this is another sort of a fail. Y'all are seeing a lot of like mishaps in this video this week. I had planned a roast. So we had a beef roast in our freezer from our local grass-fed farmer and put it in the crock pot with some bone broth. So it's cooking in bone broth, giving it lots of flavor and moisture to cook in throughout the day. And then for that night, I was gonna have a side of mashed potatoes and bone broth gravy again. I showed y'all the bone broth recipe on Monday. This is basically the same exact thing. So that night I peeled some potatoes, put them in a pot. I do a 1-pot mashed potato, which is absolutely delicious, guys. You basically just peel some potatoes. I only had 3 left. Again, we were low on everything that we got. 3 potatoes left, peeled and chopped them, put them in a pot with some milk and a little bit of broth. Again, y'all, broth is everywhere in this video. Let it simmer covered for 20 to 25 minutes, kind of just until the potatoes get soft, and then you just fork mash the potatoes and they're just creamy and delicious. You can add a little more butter, a little more milk or cream if you want a little more flavor, some herbs, salt and pepper, whatever you wish to season your mashed potatoes. These are the easiest, most perfect 1-pot mashed potatoes that I've ever tried. So then I made the gravy. In the midst of making the mashed potatoes and gravy, I went and checked my crock pot and realized that my roast was not finished. And I was like, what in the world has happened? Why is this roast not done? And I was thinking maybe I just didn't give it enough cook time. I started at about 9 o'clock that morning, and at this one it was like 5 o'clock in the evening. So I was like, no, surely the roast should have cooked by now. What is wrong? Look down at the plug-in, and it is like one of those GFI plug-ins where if you push it, it will like reset it and turn it off and like trip the outlet, the circuit, if you know what I'm talking about. We have one of those in our kitchen, and it's like kind of lower where my kids can, I guess, mess with it. Y'all don't know, our kitchen is not renovated, so this is just a mishap that we deal with. Apparently the outlet had been tripped and turned off, and my crock pot was no longer cooking my roast. So I don't know how long it actually cooked. The roast was very, very, very minimally done, so I knew we weren't gonna have it for dinner that night, so that was just out. So instead of our delicious beef roast, we just had our protein source from cream fried eggs. I basically just take some cream from our raw milk, fry your eggs in it, put the top on, and they fry up deliciously. They're super creamy and just one of our family's favorite way to eat eggs. And serve that with a side of mashed potatoes and gravy because our roast did not get finished. So y'all see, cooking from scratch, you might have a plan and something changes and you just have to adapt to what you have on hand. We always have eggs on hand, so it's always a backup that I fall to if a recipe fails or I have nothing to cook. So just learn to get creative, work with what you have, and just find ways to nourish your family the best you can. So we had broth in that gravy that night. I just whipped it up with some butter again, flour, bone broth, cream or milk, salt and pepper, seasonings, topped it with some salt and pepper, and then put that on our mashed potatoes. This is our favorite gravy, and I can almost assure you we have it at least 2, not 3 times a week in some form in our family. That's our #1 way to include broth in our meals, is through a gravy. Same with that liver. You can always sneak in liver to a gravy dish or a casserole or a broth-based dish. Super simple to start sneaking these things in your family and nourish them, and they're not even gonna realize they're eating these things. So on Thursday, I wanted to utilize that roast that we had cooked the previous day that did not actually cook. So we had a beautiful roast to eat on Thursday, and actually one of my children came down with a little sickness, just a little fever bug. And anytime anybody gets sick in our home, I immediately make this garlic soup recipe. So it is just minced garlic mixed with a little bit of salt, herbs, oregano, salt, pepper, parsley, whatever herbs you have on hand, cooked in about 6 to 7 cups of broth. Just simmer that down. It's gonna make a really garlic infused soup. It's very garlicky, but it is so healing. Garlic is one of the most healing foods we can consume. So like I said, anytime anybody in our family gets a hint of sickness, I make this soup. Everyone eats it. It heals everyone. It's a miracle how quickly the body can heal when given the proper things it needs to heal. So we made the garlic soup. I added some of that roast in there. We had a side of sourdough crackers, but again, the broth is the star of this soup. That's another reason I always have broth on hand, is in case anyone ever gets sick, I need to have broth on hand to feed to them, because it's so healing, so nourishing. Same thing with that garlic. So we had the garlic soup with the roast mixed in, the sourdough crackers. We had the same exact thing for dinner. I just made a side of sourdough biscuits. Again, I'm still working on these sourdough biscuits. I want to share them with y'all soon, but I want to get them down perfectly before I share our sourdough biscuit recipe. So that was Thursday. We just had a soup dish 2 times. I just kind of adapted it each time. I did add rice to that dish. I also always keep rice on hand, cooked in bone broth. I soak our rice in whey or water, and then cook it in bone broth the night we want to have it, and then just keep rice, bone broth rice, in the fridge at all times. I just shared a reel on how I cook the perfect rice. So if you want to know how I cook our bone broth rice, I won't go into that here, but I'll link the reel I just shared over on Instagram. You can go see how I make our super nutritious, flavorful, always perfect bone broth rice. So I put some of that in the soup too. So y'all, we're sneaking bone broth in so many ways here. So coming into Friday. Friday is typically pizza night for us. We either have pizza on Friday or Saturday. We had it Friday this week. So I made my absolute favorite sourdough pizza crust from Little Spoon Farm. I'll link the recipe down below. Basically, you mix the dough up that morning, let it ferment, roll it out that evening. And it's a really quick crust. You cook it in the cast iron skillet on top of the oven with some toppings, and then you pop it in the broiler inside your oven, and it finishes the cooking process. So it's a super quick but so delicious pizza. I've tried many sourdough pizza recipes and have not found one I loved until I started trying this one. So the way I included broth in this recipe again is through that roast. We still had leftover roast, so I topped our pizza with the roast, which was cooked in the broth. And so we're getting the benefits of that glycine and that collagen gelatin mix on our pizza topping. And y'all, we are out of tomato products. I just mentioned we were very low on groceries in this video, and I had made an order for Thrive where I get all of usually our canned tomato products. My Thrive order was late. It was actually supposed to be here the previous day. It was late, so I had no sauce for our pizza that week. So when that happens, I make that same broth gravy sauce for our pizza. So I basically take that gravy mixture, add some ketchup, mustard. If I have any type of tomato, anything, I add it to the sauce and simmer it down and make sort of a tomato flavor. It's butter, flour, broth, milk or cream, seasoning, salt, pepper. And then here I added a little bit of ketchup to add that tomato base to our pizza crust. Topped it with the shredded roast. This would have been wonderful with cheese, but we're out of cheese. We usually bulk order our cheese from Azure Standard. We haven't had any in several months. We don't typically buy grocery store cheese because 1, it's not very budget friendly. 2, we don't have the best quality cheese where we live. I would love to make cheese from our raw milk, but it takes a lot of milk to make cheese. So that's not something we are making frequently yet until we one day get our cow and milk, which will hopefully be within the next yearish. Hopefully, I'll definitely bring you along for that process. But Pizza is super easy. Y'all probably have better options for your pizza toppings than us, but we have just gotten used to working with what we have, nourishing foods that we have, and we just eat them because that's what our body craves. It's what my family knows. You may be wondering, do my kids eat all these meals? Yes, they eat all these meals. There's times where they don't finish the meal, or we might have to coax them a little and remind them that we eat these things to keep us healthy, and our children want to be healthy. Our children understand that healthy foods make them feel good, and we talk to our kids about that, so they want to eat these foods we're feeding them. So you may be watching this and being like, my kids are not going to eat any of that stuff that you just talked about, and I totally understand because these aren't typical kid-friendly meals. But if you just start making this for your family and don't give them other options and let them go hungry for a few meals, I know that sounds harsh, but your kid is not going to starve themselves. You might think they will, but they're eventually going to eat something. They may not eat the entire dish. Just try them. And if your kids are young, that's the best time to start them eating these foods because they're going to only know these kind of foods. That's all my kids know. They were never given the kid foods, the frozen packaged foods, which is just not something we ever had in our budget to buy, nor did I want my kids to get attached and hooked to those types of foods. So they have only known this type of eating. So if your kids are very young, it's the perfect time to get them to start eating this way. If they're a little older, just start cooking this way and quit providing the other options. And when they get hungry enough, they'll eat. Your taste buds will adapt to what you feed it. You change your taste bud and you can adapt them. I think I've heard in over 21 days. So if you just start incorporating these things into your foods, and y'all, these are delicious meals. I'm not just saying that because we eat them, but like, my husband will tell me if something is good or not, and he'll be honest and he'll be like, this is not your best dish. And these are all top 5 dishes that we enjoy all the time. We always eat, and he's not just being nice, y'all. My husband will tell me if something is not good, and he is brutal in the kitchen. So I promise y'all, these are delicious meals. They're very adaptable to what you have in your kitchen, to what taste preferences your family has. I just want to encourage you to start incorporating this beautiful superfood into your meals. This layer of fat I will use in our meals too. I'll just kind of chop it up, pull it out of here, and we'll cook with that at some point. I just haven't gotten to the end of the jar yet to use that. And I know y'all, again, this looks crazy, but when I put this in the fridge after it was hot out of the Instant Pot, it settled this way, and that's why that fat layer is vertical like that. So anyways, I hope this was helpful to y'all in ways you can incorporate bone broth into your family's meals. If you have any questions about anything I shared, let me know down below. I'll leave rough measurements of the 5 recipes I shared in the description if you want to refer back to them. But again, these aren't true recipes, are just ways I incorporate foods to include broth and organ meats into our family's diet, just to balance out the heavy muscle meats that we typically tend to eat here in America. My family included. We prefer the taste of muscle meats. That's just how we were raised. Now, my daughter Eliza, that you'll hear down below here, I hope to start her in a way where she craves these organ meats and these broths and all, but you have to start them really earlier. Your children are going to really quickly learn that the muscle meats taste better to them if that's all they're used to eating. So anyways, with that being said, I forgot to show y'all our hot chocolate recipe. Our hot chocolate, bone broth hot chocolate, is another easy way you can sneak this into your family's diet. Even if your family is not going to eat these meals I told you, if you're hesitant on even trying to make some of these meals for your family, start them out with bone broth hot chocolate. It's just milk, broth, double the milk to your broth, so 2 cups of milk, 1 cup of broth, 1 cup of milk, half a cup of broth, cacao powder, and maple syrup. Simmer it over the stove top, mix it really well with an immersion blender or a whisk or a blender. Serve it warm with some amazing high protein marshmallows. I've shared my protein marshmallow recipe here before. I promise you, that's one you can most likely get your kids to drink. It's so delicious. Add a little more maple syrup if they're a little hesitant on drinking it, if it's not quite sweet enough. But that's an amazing way to sneak broth into your family's diet if they're a little more hesitant on eating some of these recipes that I've mentioned in this video. So I hope y'all are excited to try some of these bone broth recipes in your family. Let me know if you try any of them or how you adapt them. I'm always so excited to hear when y'all try some of the recipes or meal ideas that I share here. But that's my main goal here, is to inspire you to cook from scratch, learn to just take ingredients and put them together and make delicious meals. You don't have to follow specific recipes all the time. And I find that the way we grocery shop and the way we budget plan our groceries, having specific recipes to follow does not work for us, because I'm typically not going to have all the ingredients for this specific Pinterest beautiful recipe that I might want to make in my house at all times, but I know the staples we keep and the way we buy groceries, and these are meals I can easily include on a whim to nourish my family with delicious broth, organ meats, flavorful food that we are going to love and enjoy and keep us healthy and well. Anyways, that is my video on how we incorporate broth in our family, as well as a little bit how I incorporate organ meats. Hope you enjoyed it. I hope you try some of these, and I will see you in a future video.